Hey, it's Kevin DeWitt here and welcome back to the Recording in a Home Music Studio course. In this video, we're going to talk about plugins. So plugins, what the heck are plugins? All right, so these are a massive thing when it comes to mixing and mastering, especially when you're doing that on the computer or in the box, as they say, and you don't have external hardware. You're reliant on using things like plugins. Okay, what these are generally, they are pieces of software that third parties make that can be installed to increase the functionality of your recording or mixing and mastering software. Now, one of the reasons that you have plugins is that it allows people like Steinberg to create Cubase in a way that is streamlined, has the functionality that they think they want to create and that they think most people will want, but it allows the software to be enhanced by other people to add features that they didn't include that you may still want. And it saves money because obviously if they added every feature that everybody in the world wants, the software would be so bloated, it would be massive, and it would cost an absolute fortune. So it allows them to keep the cost down. Obviously you have to go and pay for these extra features from other third parties, but that's your choice. It's not everybody's choice, right? So what feature I want that I'm willing to pay for, you may not. You may not want that feature. So why should you pay for it? Which is what would happen if it was included in the software. You would basically be paying Steinberg for a feature you didn't even want in the first place, but I did. And vice versa. There may be features you want that I don't, and we don't want to be paying for that if we can avoid it. Now, saying that, most software providers like Steinberg, Avid for Pro Tools, Studio One, whatever you've got, will include a lot of these themselves. Now, technically, we still refer to them as plugins. They're not really plugins because plugins is something that you add to your software. If your vendor that has made your software included them in them, they're not technically plugins. We still call them plugins though. It's just a generic term we use, so just keep that in mind. But most of them will include plugins that they believe are core functions to their system. Now, even though I say that, some people, including myself, will still buy other third-party ones that may do the same thing because it may do it better than what Steinberg did in Cubase. You know, there might be special vintage emulator EQs that we buy to not use Cubase's EQ, you know, and to use that instead. So you can do that. Now, as I said, that is a big part of mixing and mastering, right? It's almost an obsession with some people. Recording, not so much. Recording, we're more focused on virtual instruments, but there are some plugins that are useful in the recording space. Now, the key ones that I can think of is obviously Reverb. I've already mentioned that in previous videos, right? So you may want a Reverb plugin that is added to your sounds, obviously, to make them sound good when recording or after the recording, but they can also be loaded in a way that helps a vocalist, because if you're a vocalist, it can be very hard to sing totally dry, right? It just sounds horrible. It makes you feel very uncomfortable and very enclosed, especially wearing headphones while you're doing it. So you may want to have a Reverb plugin that you have loaded that it may not get recorded with the sound, but it may still play into the vocalist's ears as they record, right? So it sounds like they're recording with reverb, but they're not. You're recording dry, but you're playing reverb to them, so at least they feel comfortable with the sound of their vocals and how it's happening. Now, in my case here, I have a UAD Apollo system, which is a very unique product in the fact that it has a CPU on board, and it allows you to run plugins within it live in the recording process. So it can emulate as if you had hardware. So for instance, I may have my guitar plugged into it, and on the UAD Apollo, I can have an EQ plugin loaded, I could have a compressor loaded, and these are actually being recorded in my sound. So I'm making changes to my instrument in these plugins and being recorded. Now, if you do it in your computer itself, generally those plugins aren't going to be recorded. So you could have them on there just for your listening pleasure if that's what you choose, but it is going to load your system down a little bit. But they're generally not going to be recorded. You could interchange them. But that depends again on your software. Your software may function differently. You may load them in a position on, say, the actual input, and it may record those plugins. Now, another plugin that's obviously can be quite useful for vocal recordings in this day and age is something like Autotune or Melodyne or something like that. Now, a lot of the time, these can be placed after the fact in mixing, or most of the time you will do it in that case. But you may have certain artists that, or yourself, that want to actually record through something like Autotune with that real Autotune effect, you know, that sort of robotic glitchy effect. And you can't do that without the sound being there, because obviously it probably seems weird to just sing or rap naturally in a way that you want Autotune to do something unusual with it, but you can't hear it until after the fact. So you may need something like, as I said, Autotune running live in your recording so that you are actually recording that glitchy effect, and that way you're actually projecting your vocal in the right way to get Autotune to do that function. So that's another common one as well. So there's many plugins out there. Obviously I can't cover them all. We'll run through a few now, just as I said, just to give an example of loading them up and showing you the concepts of plugins and that sort of thing.
Right, so when it comes to plugins for recording, in my system here, I have two locations I can load them. Now, the first one, which would be probably more appropriate for yourself, unless you have a UAD system, would be to do it in your recording software. So the problem with running the plugins in your recording software is going to be latency, and you're going to have to concern yourself with the buffer size and all of those settings to try and get them more efficient and working properly. So generally in recording, I'm not going to be using many plugins really, especially not in my recording software, but there is times that they can be appropriate. So if we will, I'll do it from the channel setting here. So let's say for instance on this Vox track. So what we do, plugins get loaded in the inserts rack, right? It's just where plugins go. It's an insert. All right, we're inserting it into the path of the audio, and we're placing this plugin in that path. All right, so on this vocal track here, let's say we wanted to load a reverb plugin. So I can just do a search for reverb, or if I know the name of it, we can do that as well. And I might decide, okay, I'm going to open up Roomworks. Okay, this is an inbuilt Cubase from Steinberg plugin. So this is what I'm saying. I call these plugins, and most people do as well, but it's actually built into the software. You know, they give it to you. So it's been placed as an insert on here. So all the audio is going to pass through. So it's going to come in the input and it's going to pass through this before it goes out to your listening environment. So whatever you do on here is going to get processed there, and you can change how much reverb, mix, and all that sort of stuff. But you're not limited to inbuilt ones. As I said, we can buy many other ones and third-party ones. So I could load up a totally different brand, for instance, Little Plate. We could load that up there, and this is one from Soundtoys. So this is one that you can get from a third party called Soundtoys. And it's a different style of reverb. It's a plate reverb, and it's a very simple interface. That's all it pretty much does. And we're not limited to those plugins, right? There's tons more. There's everything you can think of. But, you know, this is an example, I guess, for recording where there's not as much that we're going to use there. Now, on the other hand, if I take that away, if I want to remove latency and do it an entirely different way, because I have a UAD Apollo, I can do it here in my UAD console. So this is before it even reaches the Cubase software. And the advantage of this is that, for one, it introduces no extra latency because the UAD Apollo has the CPUs in them and it is running its own plugins. The downside is that obviously you can only use UAD plugins. You can't use any other parties. You can't use Cubase ones. You can't use any other third-party ones. That's just the way this works. It's a proprietary system, and you must use their plugins. Now, to give you an example, there's a couple of sections here. There's a unison part up the top. Now, this is sort of a concept by UAD that the plugin is integrated into the preamp of the microphone input. So it actually changes the preamp in a way that makes it act like the hardware more inherently than just adding a plugin. So you can see from my mic here, I actually have a UAD 610A preamp placed on it, you know, with a bit of gain, whatever, bit of life to it. So I'm not using the native preamps, I'm using this plugin, which changes the preamps to that. But on top of that, I can then load more plugins that are from UAD. So for instance here, I have a UAD de-esser, which you can see when I say SSS, it's moving up there. It's compressing my S's, right? So it's de-essing them. I then have another compressor on here. So this is now doing some compression on my vocals, or my voice, right? To take the peaks down and keep the lows up, so, you know, it's a little bit more flat and a bit more even. Not totally even, but a bit more. And then I even have this SSL interface here, which is doing a little bit of EQ and actually has a gate. So when I stop talking, it silences and gates, so you don't hear hiss in the room when I'm not talking and all that sort of stuff. And with the UAD system, I could add many, many more plugins, right? They have tons and tons of plugins here, and I can set these up to record through. So as I said, my vocal is being recorded through all of these plugins right now. Okay, and if I was recording guitars or anything else, I could load anything I wanted in here and record it. But the great thing with guitars is I could also add amp plugins. So I could pull up a virtual amplifier from Diesel, whatever, you know, so I plug my guitar direct in and the amp gets run in there. Right, I don't actually own that one, that's why it's complaining, but you know, I could do it. And that's the beauty of the UAD Apollo system, but I'm not here to sell you the system, okay? I just wanted to explain the way that I could do that in recording. And there's other systems out there that can do similar things. You know, Waves has a product, and I think Audent or somebody else has another product, and even Steinberg themselves now, I think, have a new product, which looks interesting. They have a very advanced audio interface as well, which can, I suspect, I haven't really looked into it, but run Cubase plugins. So they're the two methods, and that's how you load plugins, and that's how you use plugins.
So if you have any questions or anything at all about plugins, please put it in the comments. Happy to have discussions about that. As I said, there's plenty of plugins out there, so it may be a matter of you just demoing lots out to find what you actually want. But keep in mind that you obviously might have a tight budget, so keep that in mind, and obviously look at the plugins in your software, because some of them can be very good and you do not need to replace them if they sound good. Even if other people out there in society and on the web tell you you should, you don't have to, okay? As long as you're getting the results you're after, then you can use whatever you have at hand. Hopefully this video has been helpful. Thank you for watching, and I will catch you in the next one.